I'm here with Adam Adamou of OverActive Media, the parent company behind Toronto Defiant, Toronto Ultra, and Mad Lions. And I understand congratulations are in order because you were promoted to CEO recently. And as you announced in your quarterly earnings report, you are profitable in this quarter, which is a first for your organization, as I understand it. So congratulations there. And we're getting together during a time where not too much is known about the future of the Overwatch League, or rather Overwatch esports. And it was interesting to see that in your sort of goodbye post to the Overwatch League, you made it clear that this isn't a goodbye. It's just till we meet again. So in order to give a little bit of information to the Overwatch community where we are with that, I thought it would be interesting to, talk about why you guys continue to be bullish on Overwatch esports, and also how OverActive Media still believes in some of the core tenets that the Overwatch League had at its core that seemingly were found out by other organizations to not be working as well, but you seem to be doubling down. So I thought it would be interesting to illuminate that. So I guess the first question would be, as outlined, you guys appear to be bullish on Overwatch esports. Just from a game perspective and from a community perspective, why is that game still interesting to you?
Okay, well, there was a lot of questions there in that intro, Yiska. But first of all, let me thank you for inviting me on your show. I've been following, you and your podcast for 5 years, and I knew that eventually, if I kind of kept at it, that I would be invited on to speak with you. So we're here, and it's unfortunate you couldn't make it to our event in Toronto.
Yeah.
But this is the next best thing for now. Now, I guess your first question was why do we continue to be excited? Was that? I mean, there was a number of questions. Which one do you want me to start with? Sure. Look, Overwatch is an incredibly unique game in kind of the esports landscape. When you take a look at the alternatives that are out there, particularly in the Western world, but of course, Overwatch has strong overlap in Asia as well. It has, I think, a very kind of unique fit in there in terms of both the fan base and the play style and the business model, let's say, of the game. And we believe that is worth supporting, relative to the rest of the games that we're involved in. When we look at alternatives for us, let's say, for our fan base, we're in Call of Duty, we're in League of Legends. We are very interested in Valorant. I would say Valorant is an interesting game to us. And then after that, you've got Counter-Strike, which is kind of like Valorant, and that is a tough business model. We're kind of looking at that for 2025, but Counter-Strike has always been difficult, I think, for many reasons. Then there's other games like, Rainbow Six, Rocket League, and so on, Apex, and we think Overwatch is just head and shoulders, kind of has the potential to be up there with the peak esports, and so it's worth supporting.
Are you not concerned about the viewership experience being a bit more confusing than maybe the other esports that you mentioned?
Well, I mean, look, as with many things in the Overwatch League era, many things were confusing to me and to our fans, right? So, am I concerned about it being confusing? I'm actually kind of optimistic that it might be less confusing going forward than it was over the last 5 years that we were involved with the Overwatch League. Before the Overwatch League, and even in the first part of the Overwatch League, particularly during our time on Twitch, look, and you were active in esports at the time. You saw the enthusiasm and the viewership. During that time, in particular, that Twitch era, Overwatch was the #1 channel on Twitch in terms of average minute audience. Think about that. There's lots of things on Twitch. #1 for average minute audience was Overwatch. Okay, and so it has met that potential in the past, and we lost some of that potential. And look, you've been following it. You see all sorts of things that could have gone better, that didn't go well. Updates, games, all of that stuff that happened during that time, and yet Overwatch still has this incredibly passionate community. And I think it's because of the uniqueness of the game and the potential for it, And to be quite honest, if we get out of our way, I think it kind of is naturally higher than where it was. I think, the things that we did diminished it. And, I'm optimistic that, we've learned something in the last 5 years and we can fix it and make it better going forward.
Perfect. Now, you already brought up one of the potential issues with it. Do you think it was a mistake to go away from Twitch?
In hindsight, yes, it was a mistake. It wasn't. It wasn't. Look, we had to explore things at the time, and I don't blame the move to YouTube on Activision or Blizzard in terms of that. I know the community says that, at the time, the model for esports, particularly the Activision, actually, the model was, kind of similar to the sports model where you can generate significant media rights. And our experience with Twitch was incredibly successful. And we're in other leagues, and those other leagues were looking over there and saying, like, holy cow, that is an incredibly good deal. We surpassed the viewership expectations the Twitch had set, contrary to expectations, and we exceeded them, and then they actually paid extra as a result of doing that. And the move to YouTube, was based on the landscape at the time, and really, it was a mistake. But let me just explain the thinking behind it. If we were able to move the audience, okay, from Twitch and keep it and bring it to YouTube, the media rights as a property becomes much bigger, right? Because if they think that you can carry your audience with you, in other words, if the audience belongs to you, okay, then it is more valuable and they will bid more for it. Okay. And then of course, Google also made a lot of promises in terms of what they would be able to add to the game, support and features and so forth. That I was disappointed in kind of at the end of the period in terms of what they delivered. But that was a very high risk experiment, okay, to see if that could happen. I think we were optimistic. And as with many startups, sometimes some of those things fail, but it's a risk worth taking. But I think it's a risk that was worth taking that didn't succeed, and we should now actively look to undo it.
Does that mean the future is necessarily to be multi-platform possible?
I think my support for it would be conditional on that.
Makes sense, yeah. Now you talked about different things during your 5 years in the Overwatch League being confusing to you. What was the problem with the esports system, or rather the incentive structure maybe in the Overwatch League?
Well, look, I don't want to kind of point the finger at any group. I think there was a lot of incredible highs, and then COVID hit, I think, and so we can't really know for sure whether that initial model, which was incredibly aspirational, was crazy or was crazy, but it succeeded, right? And back when COVID hit, look, we were sold out on our first homestand. We also had priced our tickets kind of at the high end of the spectrum, and we still sold out, kind of as fast as we possibly could. So the enthusiasm was there, and it's kind of in line with those high risk components that I was mentioning with respect to the move to YouTube. Like, to kind of get it to the level where we as franchise owners wanted it to be, we were willing to take some risks. And unfortunately, we weren't able to show that during that time. And I think, look, with COVID, came difficulties, challenges, losses, changes in business models and so forth and so on, that by the time we were able to kind of go back and consider that model, it just wasn't viable for many of the teams in terms of where we were with the game. And so it felt like we missed that opportunity, right? And I think, all of those challenges are all kind of combined in that era was not conducive to building the league that we wanted.
What do you think to the arguments that has since been brought forth a lot of the time that COVID actually helped the Overwatch League sustain a little bit longer, just because the proof of concept of the homestead model was delayed, so to speak, and therefore, certainty that this was at least not feasible for some of the franchises, that certainty was delayed. What do you think about that argument?
I don't think so. I mean, maybe. If we could redo history, we could find out what it was. I can say that every team and every franchise was set up for their homestands. Okay, so and of course we weren't going to set up 20 games per team at home in that first year, but there was like a schedule and a plan, and every single team was going to do that. And so I would say, like, if you go back and you do that, and you've got 20 teams all playing, kind of at least one homestand, maybe two homestands, kind of traveling to China and doing kind of the Asian component, like all of that stuff, if you redo it, I think that would have been incredibly special. Nothing else like it. It would have been incredibly expensive, okay? But it would have, look, it could have failed, okay? But I would much rather try and not succeed than have that opportunity taken away from us.
Sure. And we want to talk about the aspect of localization and also organization-led, planning of events a little bit later. But there was one interesting thing that you recently explained or hinted at in your quarterly earnings call, where you said something about the team participation agreement being an obstacle in certain ways. Was it mostly about streaming lights, or can you define it a little bit? What the problem was?
No, look, the teams were in it all together, okay, and we've all got the same agreement. And there was the business model is like any kind of professional sports league, where you treat all the teams the same, and everybody gets the same deal. And clearly, some of the teams no longer wanted to be a part of it, right? And or were not, kind of interested, or didn't have the financial resources. There's a lot of kind of components that go into it. We weren't even available in China, right? So, to make changes, big changes, you need certain percentages of agreements, and you need to have everybody buy in. And so you lose the flexibility to make those changes, right? And so you need to get rid of it, right? So that you can make the changes that are required. And from Blizzard's perspective, it was pretty expensive to do it. I think it was also pretty expensive for us to continue to be in it, when we didn't see a model that could work for us. Like, where is this model going? Sometimes I'm asked, like, it feels like we're doing the same thing, kind of the definition of insanity. And so, like, it could be fixed, but it couldn't be fixed within the TPA, right? And so if you wanted to not be a part of it, you have to be freed, okay? Go and do other stuff. And then, kind of the message to Blizzard is, okay, look, where this needs to go. I believe they do. Go and do it, okay? And if you've got a good model, the teams will come back, okay? And I think that's what we needed to do to save Overwatch as an esport.
Was that not theoretically the purpose of the ownership meetings, where Blizzard was supposedly, trying to suggest a new model and possibly go forward?
There was just teams that didn't want to do it, right? It doesn't really matter. If you've got 20 teams, and whatever the percentage is, right, of who wants to kind of be aggressive in changing and fixing, and who just doesn't want to be a part of it at all, there's no point carrying people who are not interested. Like, I'd rather have 10 teams that are highly motivated than 20 teams, half of which don't care, right? And let's also remember that the size of the pie in terms of the monetization, is diluted if you've got more teams, right? And so, like, if you're carrying a budget roster and you're barely putting together a team, and you don't want to spend any money on anything, but you're getting minimum guarantees, or revenue share, or skin revenue, and all of that stuff, like, that money does not benefit Blizzard. It doesn't benefit the fans, and it doesn't benefit the teams that are interested, right? And so it doesn't make sense to me to pay people who are not interested in being a part of it money that could be better used elsewhere, right? And so that's, again, that's just a bad model. So let's get rid of it and move on.
That sounds to me like you didn't inherently disagree with the core tenets or ideas of the league, but more so the financial and incentive structures towards all actors within the agreement, right?
No, I wouldn't say that's true. I would say, look, we had an idea 5 years ago, and that idea is, some things were validated and some things were not. I don't think you can be dogmatic in saying, that, that's just the best model and it's the only model. I think it's a model. We had some views as to what would drive the monetization of it, okay, and how we would engage the fans. I would say, some of the local components engaged fans in a very big way, and that was an interesting model. I would say, the view with respect to media rights and, multiple local events did not prove right. And so, in the context of everything that we know, you got to take that and you got to say, like, where do we double down and where do we eliminate? Okay. And if you double down on the right things, then you're going to be in a good position. But if you double down dogmatically on the things that are clearly just those facts just did not come to fruition, then you're not being very smart, I think.
What's interesting to me in how OverActive Media seems to strategize is that it's rather different from the other organizations. I think after even COVID, I think there was limited enthusiasm towards hosting homestands, while you guys were, happy to host LAN event, or rather offline events in Toronto. Why is that? Why do you believe in organization-led tournament organization?
Well, look, because it's about the audience and the fans, right? And what we're doing is we're providing, kind of an incredibly, we're providing a product to an incredibly passionate fan base, right? And we fan base first and foremost, okay, and we believe that the game has kind of a unique demographic fit in there, right? And the live experience is it's kind of, to us, it's like having like a favorite artist that you listen to, on the radio, or actually not on the radio, on Spotify and that kind of stuff, right? You're a big Taylor Swift fan. There's one thing to listen to it or to watch the videos. There's another thing to be there in person, and to have the community around you to really experience it kind of in that visceral live situation. And it's always been our view that the live component is just integral to esports. There's like various components to it, but seeing it live makes it real. And the memories that you have, again, we're looking long term, right? The memories that you have, 10 years from now, where many of our fans are in their 20s, in 10 years, in their 30s, we believe they're still going to like the things that they did in their 20s, just like I do, right? And when they have children or friends and they're older, they're not going to necessarily remember, the YouTube video that they watched. They're going to remember that event, that jersey, that time, those friends. And the more of those experiences we can put together for everybody that comes to our live event, we believe that they will be fans of us and of the game for 10 years and beyond. Okay, that's where you lock in that fan base. That's where you create the memory that they will never forget. And that is foundational, I think, to esports.
I think that's well taken. The one problem that we heard through the grapevine over the years is that owners said that they're losing hundreds of thousands of dollars on organizing these events. Is that something that you just take on? Are you making money on these, or are you treating it as a loss leader?
Well, if they can't figure out a business model that works, then they shouldn't have live events. Okay. And I think, kind of on a go forward basis, I don't see a situation where, any future esport league is going to try to do what the Overwatch League or even the Call of Duty we're trying to do with that many local events. But we want to have local events here. We have a business model that I think works well with local events. I think we've got terrific partners and incredible capabilities. I think our team has done, I would put them up against anybody. There's nobody that runs better local events than I think OverActive Media does here in Toronto with our partners here. And we will. I think we're happy to take on more if they're available out there. And it really is kind of a big part of our business model. We've got strong support here from our community across Canada, I would say. We've got kind of strong support from kind of tourism groups and government groups and other people that want to see esports thrive as kind of an industry here in the market. And then we've also got strong support from our sponsors and business partners, right? And I think the best sales pitch when we're talking to partners and sponsors and so forth is to show them the event. When they come in there, and over the course of the weekend, there's whatever number of thousands of fans, 10,000, 12,000, whatever the number is over the course of the weekend, it becomes real to them as well. These are not, the people that come to our events know the game. Okay, they know who to cheer for. They know what players are there. They cheer before the caster says anything because they know what that move is. Okay, and that highlights that regardless of what the viewership is, kind of on the live feed, there is a much larger audience of people out there that are following the game, that are watching the YouTubes, that are on Reddit, that know the community, and when they come to the game, they know the game. And that the best way to show sponsors that is to basically say, look, okay, look at the stuff that is happening there. Look at the number of people lining up outside. Look at the merchandise sales that we're putting together, and whether that kind of makes a few $100,000 or loses a few $100,000, the benefits longer term and shorter term to building that community is just immeasurable. Like I would easily pay a couple of $100,000 for all the benefits that we get.
Now, one explanation you gave in there is also interesting in terms of the category size of fan, or rather what kind of area the respective teams inhabit. And I think what is interesting is that you said it's wider Canada. You only really had competition for Canadian fans in the Vancouver Titans. They weren't maybe doing as much as you guys were doing. And I wonder if the categorization unit of city, or rather region around the city, to be fair, in Overwatch League, is too small for esports. Do you think, also given that you have insight through your Mad Lions brand, do you think the unit of city is too small yet for esports? Do we have to go to country, region?
No, maybe. I would say it depends on the city, and it depends on your business plan. I think we always considered our market to be Canada for the Overwatch League, notwithstanding obviously the guys in Vancouver. But we were fortunate that, some of our founding employees also were with the Raptors when they launched in Canada as well. And as you recall, the Raptors launched alongside the Vancouver Grizzlies in Vancouver. Okay. And what the Toronto Raptors did very well is really kind of engage all of Canada as part of their fandom. And so we followed that same model, I think, with well, I'm not going to say similar success. The Raptors are pretty big, but in terms of within our scope, kind of similar success. And we really wanted to engage outside. If you remember, in our first year, we set up like a tier 2 team in Montreal called the Montreal Rebellion. Like we wanted to kind of establish ourselves, kind of as a Canadian brand, and I think we succeeded. Now, the U.S. is a different market, and I think maybe there's more opportunity, but there's also more challenges. But certainly, you could do it on a state level, what we did in Canada as a nation level. Like, for example, you could end up being, the Texas team, and there's 2 teams in Texas. I think the economy of Canada is bigger than the economy of Texas, I believe, but not by much, right? And certainly California, the economy of that state is probably bigger than the economy of Canada, right? So when you're looking at it, you could look at it on a state level, notwithstanding that you might be a city-based team. And then, of course, in Europe, you have like the entire country, right? And I know that, London and Paris had aspirations that way. And, I think COVID and the subsequent kind of impact had a very big hit on them. I mean, it was very hard to kind of build your fan base in those countries. And those countries have an extremely passionate, especially France. I mean, it's just crazy for esports, right? But it really kind of hurt their business model. So I don't know, but I think the ownership was smart enough, I think, of the teams to adapt as necessary. And I think, some of them did adapt and some of them stopped caring.
Sure. Now, there seems to be a pattern emerging that North American esports is in a tough position. I understand why it's a great location to succeed in, given the available capital there. But it still feels like the North American esports generally across the industry is in for an uphill battle, with exception of esports that have high novelty injection through new releases, or rather, in Valorant's case, it's still probably in the up hype cycle. It remains to be seen if that continues. What is it about, I suppose, the American viewer or North American viewer that's different than, seemingly European and Asian viewers?
Well, I mean, I wish I could tell you. I could tell you that one of the fundamental kind of challenges of the Americas, especially North America, is that the server sizes are smaller than either European or the Asian regions, right? And to become at the elite level, you need to play against more better players, okay? And the smallest market from just a player base is the North American one, right? So it's not, North American players, Canadian players, tend to not be at the highest level at many esports, right? And it's not because of the server size, is my view. Like, if you were to take the teams and base them all in Korea, okay, you're going to have some North American players that are at the peak there of any sport, okay, because they have the ability and the capability. They're just not playing at that highest level where you've got, I don't know, 100 million people across, China and Southeast Asia and Korea playing against you. So that server size issue is just something that we cannot overcome in the short term until the technology gets there where you have like one global, server with ping that's playable for everybody. I'm not even sure if that's possible. So that is, that's an issue. And Americans in particular only want the best. And if you're not the best, they don't care, right? Just look at how many times football tried to get into the US. Football, meaning European football as opposed to American football. Like, Americans are just used to being the best at everything, and when they kind of don't see that, they tend to not be as interested. Okay, so that may have something to do with it. I'm not completely sure, but I do think that there is no more important market for esports than the American market, and by that I mean the U.S. market. And I think it has a lot of potential, but maybe we've been kind of going at it, the wrong way. I think the teams that is the best, or the game that is the best positioned, okay, in the U.S. is probably Call of Duty, because it is distinctly American in the same way that NFL football is distinctly American, right? The best players of that game are American, right? It is a controller kind of console type game, which, again, the sales of those are the highest proportionately in the United States than in many other markets. And it is influencer driven, right, by American influencers, right? And so, part of my view is, like, we really have to get Call of Duty right, okay? Like, Call of Duty should be the number one esport in the US, I think, given, what we just discussed. And then after that, we will see. But I do think that Overwatch can be a contender there because there is a wide opening outside of that, right? I think League is struggling. I think Valorant, like, I'm a big fan personally of Valorant. I just think as a game, Valorant, I think Overwatch can be more popular in the US than Valorant. I'm not sure what the user bases are, but I know more people that play Overwatch than play Valorant kind of on a game. But Ryan is just so good at the esports, right? And we try to use that with other publishers, and we say, look, Riot spends most of its marketing budget on esports. Like, you're not going to see a big billboard on, on Broadway or on the Sphere, for Valorant. They put it into their majors and their events and their prizes and the associated music and all the world championships that they do, and that creates, the minute and the sales and the game, the audience for the game for them. Okay, and if you even if you don't want to invest that much, okay, which I think, again, Riot gets an incredible return in terms of just the game sales from esports. But even if you invest a fraction of that, okay, you can be the top two esports in terms of Call of Duty and Overwatch in North America, and hopefully we're getting a good hearing from Activision Blizzard, because I do think there's an opportunity there, especially for the US.
Now, also respecting your time, and I still wanted to talk a little bit about the future, which is that, I mean, Jacob reported on it, I reported on it, that third-party tournament organizers seem to be on the way in. With that, let's talk hypothetically, if that was to happen, it introduces some volatility from the organization side. Let's say we run open bracket tournaments. There's no assurance that your team will make it to the streamed games, even in the type of systems we're currently running with Flash Ops, for instance. So how much security does a team need in order to feel good about participating in third-party tournaments?
Look, I think my view right now is depending on what is announced, right? So, I mean, I'm optimistic and I'm lobbying hard for the way that we would like to see it work. But I'm optimistic that, it's heading in the right direction for the fans, okay? I don't think it's the best direction for us as team owners, okay? In the short term, okay? But what you need to do for 24 is you need to re-engage the fans, okay? You need to kind of go back to the enthusiasm that we had for Overwatch before the Overwatch League, okay? Without kind of saying that everything about it was a failure, but you need to get more teams, okay? You need to have more tournaments, you need to have more engagement, and you need to have higher viewership, okay? And you need to have new entrants, kind of coming in as well, okay? And in many ways, that is not good for us, right? I mean, if I've only got, 10 or 12 teams in North America now, I might have 40, okay? But, and so that makes it more difficult for everybody, obviously, right? But if we go in that direction, and that's the direction that I'm pushing for, having 40 teams, right, increases the audience, right? I mean, like, I've got 39 other highly committed organizations out there that are promoting Overwatch esports that I can kind of play against, and we can take our chances with respect to the tournaments and whatever the live events are. But first and foremost, if there's going to be a future, we need to rebuild the fan base, and I would like to see that. I would like to see a huge number of teams in North and South America. Okay, make it as easy for teams to enter as possible, okay? And I would like to see the same thing in Asia and Europe, okay? I would like to see some region locking, okay, at least for a period of time, so that we can help to develop the regional talent, right? Where you're not being squeezed out by constantly trying to focus on winning the world championship in the first year, right? And then I think you need to go and get the biggest audience possible by making your programs available on every streaming platform that wants to basically carry it, okay? Then you have to hire the best talent, okay? Whoever the production managers are, whoever the tournament organizers are, and I don't really have any information on that, but you need to have a great show with the best talent, okay? And if you can do that, and you run for a year, I think we can reach, or we can better see what our peak audience is, right? I think the audience will be higher than it was last year, next year, okay? I think that's, from our perspective, worth investing in after 5 years of building the audience and building the infrastructure and building the teams. I think we want to be there, to see how this comes together. Now, if the system comes back and our assessment is that, it's a disaster, right? We're going to be, you know, the audience isn't going to be engaged or whatever, then I would be very disappointed. But so far, I'm getting really kind of good feedback, and I've got a level of optimism. I think kind of maybe the question they asked at the beginning that you might ask next is like, why aren't the other teams excited, right? And I don't know who's excited or who's not, but I think if I was to answer that, the reason would be is that for 24, it's probably not a great deal from the team organization monetization perspective. Okay, so it is worse for the teams, but it is better for the players. It is better for the fans. It is better for building an audience. Okay, and it is better for the future. And so we're willing to take that hit for the time being to kind of get this established. And others are just not, and that's okay, right?
It feels like, given that Blizzard is now less incentivized to sort of help the esports audience, unless they want to sell, skins and whatnot. It's you could expect that there would be less developer help in these systems. Do you think there needs to be a minimum? I remember, for instance, Arnold from Genji saying he's not particularly interested in esports that aren't going forward and won't have microtransaction, or rather in-game skins for teams going forward. Do you think that's the bare minimum?
Yeah, I agree with him. I mean, we're aligned on that completely, right? But the monetization of kind of microtransactions in game requires the game to have a large audience, okay, and it has to have a large player base, okay. And so just basically saying I've got this game and it's a limited audience, and I'll give you, and that's what some of the smaller games do. They provide more incentive for skins, but the player base is too small, okay. And so I can have these amazing skins, but there's not that many people that want to buy them. And so I think, I would think it's very difficult for Blizzard to offer, in-game transactions in 24 if they're going to open it up to 100 teams. I wouldn't want that. Okay, there's too much product out there for us to be able to kind of do anything, right? So I think you need to help Blizzard and Overwatch develop the ecosystem. That's what I'm saying. And I think from the sale of the skins that we did in the past, right? The audience that we've developed, the people that came to our live events, the brands and sponsors that are interested in it, okay? It is in many ways the perfect product for esports, okay? And we didn't get it right the first time, and now we didn't get it right the first time to some degree because we weren't patient enough. We probably should have not gone exclusive when we did, ever. We should have probably kept the audience base as big as possible, right? To build a fan base over time, right? And maybe we moved a little bit too quickly on some of these plans. So now that we have a chance to do a remake, let's just kind of slow down and build it from the ground up. We can only benefit as teams if the audience cares. And right now, the biggest risk is that the audience will not care, right? And so let's fix that, because I think the audience is there for this game.
Sure. Now, I assume, I'm not sure how this works, but I assume when you tweet that you want to host an event in Toronto sometime, and you add developers, and you actually get a response, that doesn't seem to me like this is just a cold call. There's probably already something behind the scenes maybe going on, or is this really your pitch?
No, there's nothing behind the scenes. Look, we think that it is critical so that the developers are actively involved and passionate about the esport. And I can't say that was the case during the Overwatch League. And it was really a foundational problem, okay? The Overwatch League foundationally was a league that would be monetized through the media rights, okay? And it was a separate product for Blizzard or Activision, in terms of it would sit over here and it wouldn't, the developers didn't need to buy in. This is a product, we're going to use your IP, but really it's very limited work that you have to do on it, okay? And that's not a good model, Okay, so when you're talking about, kind of Arnold's views on what's needed, my view is that you absolutely need to be partners with the developers. Okay, I don't want to be partners with the publisher, right? I want to be partners with the developer. Okay, and in the best esports, well, okay, let's leave the Valve ones aside because that's just a crazy model. Okay, but Valve does a lot of things kind of internally to help kind of the esports ecosystem as well. But in the best esports, that's where the partnership is. And I used our the grand finals for the Overwatch League to spend a lot of time with Aaron and Jared to sell them on why they should care, okay, and to explain to them the business model for other leagues that we're in, okay, and then have them look at all these passionate fans. And for me to basically say, look, guys, I would do this again. I would do this twice. I would do this 3 times, right? And I think we did a pretty good job selling them, right? And so, I continue to sell, kind of the developers, and I will continue to sell Aaron and Jared and the rest of the people over there, because if they buy in, okay, we will have a great esport that is supported by them in the game, in the microtransactions, and in the esport. And I think we're closer than we've ever been. So, Jared, Aaron, if you're out there, okay, we're here to help you guys, build this as, one of the leading and greatest esports in the world, but we can't do it without your full and active support.
Do you felt a change in how developers were stanced against or with esports when the change happened between Jeff Kaplan and Aaron?
It started slowly, right? I mean, I would say it's better now than it was under the Jeff Kaplan era, right? But I think the model just didn't work for the developers, right? And that's, I honestly don't think that the developers were included enough in the initial decision making for most esports. Okay, it was kind of like a side hustle. Okay, for the publishers. And I think it needs to be a partnership in the way that Riot partners with their esports group, right? And I think what I'm the most optimistic about is that we can reboot Overwatch esports, okay, with not necessarily just in partnership with Blizzard, or really it was Activision, right? I mean, there's different groups over there, but with Team 4, right? And like I want to go to meetings not with the C-suite people at Activision Blizzard. I want to go to team meetings with, the developers, right? And I want them to see this as the perfect expression of their game, okay? And then for them to say, using, like, we can get a return, for our game by supporting this as well. This is not just a cost or a burden, right, to us. This is something that, we can be proud of, right? And I don't think that those discussions were held, unfortunately, in the early days. And I think finally, we have to remember, developers put their heart and soul into a game, right? And look, gamers are very judgmental. And we complain about everything, right? I mean, who doesn't complain? You get your thing, I mean, it happens all the time. But it's particularly hurtful when, whether it's the Overwatch League or Call of Duty or Counter-Strike 2 or whatever you're doing out there, and these peak players, okay, that are kind of in your ecosystem are among the loudest detractors about everything, right? And it scares them that, if this is something that we're trying to kind of promote and create the best of everything, and then we encourage the best players to come in who are just trashing our game, do we really need it? Like, this should kind of provide a glow, not, guys throwing shade at us, right? And I think, and I think we've gone through some tough times, I think, in many esports where the pro players are actually kind of biting the hand that feeds them, and hopefully we can overcome that.
Do you sense a tide change, or rather any change coming from the merger with Microsoft or acquisition?
Not yet. We haven't seen anything. I mean, I think technically Microsoft could not even have any conversations at all with Activision Blizzard until it was actually formally closed. So and then they're just starting to do the integration now, right? I think, like, I'm optimistic because, the bigger our partner, okay, the more resources they have that are not necessarily material to them, right? So if you kind of take, let's say, $100 million, $100 million would be a very tremendously huge number to, like, a smaller company like the developers of Smite or some of the smaller games. They just wouldn't have that kind of resources, right? $100 million would be, kind of a good sized number to, like, Activision Blizzard, right? And $100 million is not at all material to Microsoft. I mean, they probably spend that on ad targeting, maybe, every quarter or less, right? So I think, we want to have partners that are as big as possible. Tencent is obviously behind, the Riot kind of esports. And the bigger the partner, I think the more resources they can put into it. And so, we start with the developers in terms of my lobbying, right? And then you move up, and then, of course, it's going to go to eventually to Microsoft.
Sure. And then I guess as a last question, given that you've said you're still looking forward to participating in Overwatch esports going forward, as under which name would OverActive Media come back? Because you have a couple to pick from, even, I mean,
yeah,
including Splice, I suppose, but
yeah, we could go with Splice, but I don't think we will.
Yeah.
I think 2024 is a transitional year, and it's already December now, believe it or not, and we don't even have kind of definitive plans right now. So I think, again, without holding me to it 100%, I'm pretty proud of the Toronto Defiant name and brand and so forth, and I think we would be most inclined to stay with that name and brand for 24, so that we could figure out where the model and the system would be. And then I think for 25, with the learnings that we have, we would look to maybe unify around the global brand for all of our teams, right? So again, that's kind of our medium-term plan at the 25. So yeah, I like Toronto Defiant. I've got the jersey here. I think that's probably the leading candidate right now.
Have you gotten any certainties what will happen? I mean, that you can maintain the brand, and of course, also the in-game skins are sort of a big question mark, right?
All of our intellectual property we own with respect to the Overwatch League. So all of that is ours. I think, the skins and those types of things are something that, can be, we're looking forward to getting an update on in terms of whatever the new model is. Again, that's going to be a function of probably more the developers and the publishers. So we'll see. Again, I don't have an expectation that for 24, the Overwatch League model is going to be fully set, with here's, minimum guarantees for everybody, here's MTX. I don't think that's the plan. I think what we need to do is we need to encourage as many teams and players as possible to engage, okay? That makes it very difficult to kind of create some of the in-game items for, the in-game partnerships that we have with some leagues. But what I would want to see is let's reboot, let's create the base, okay? And then down the road, whether it's 25 or 26, we can move to a long-term partnership model where that stuff can come back. But I think we have more to gain from encouraging, kind of that reboot than we have from being too greedy too soon.
Sure. Then we are looking forward to what you guys are cooking up with that event that hopefully is going to come.
Hopefully, if you're talking to them, let them know Toronto's a great place. You weren't here though, so you wouldn't know for sure.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yes.
It's an expensive city, to be fair.
Yes, it is. It is.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you for the interview, and best of luck in your endeavors going forward.